My name is Stephen Penholder. So I am a director at TKS and Knowledge Society, so we teach about entrepreneurship and startups and science and all that stuff. I'm super excited about that and the future of that. I also created a startup called Acorn Biolabs before that. I'd say that's kind of like my claim to fame. That startup went pretty well, and it is still going. And I'm happy to kind of talk about that in the Q&A after. First of all, just like a question for you guys. What are you excited about in the future? Look at that phone there. And she's drawing on like a cool pen with like a tablet thing. And you've also got a pen thing. And that didn't exist 5 years ago. And what's going to exist 5 years from now or 10 years from now? It's going to be very different than it is today. Oh, ChatGPT. There's one thing, right? That didn't exist 2-3 years ago.
I use it for coding. It's just so much easier to debug.
Nice.
It works pretty well most of the time. I haven't tried Copilot.
I haven't tried Copilot? Okay, so what I've heard is ChatGPT makes a bunch of errors, and you have to be smart enough to go in and fill them out. There now exists an artificial intelligence that you can ask questions and it'll produce lines of code for you. This didn't exist 3 years ago. And 5 years from now, it'll probably be way better in ways that we don't anticipate. So anyway, I just want to get you excited by the future a little bit before I really start here. Okay, this is what I'm going to talk about. Science, startups in a software world, right? Software is huge. Software is dominant in the startup space. How many of you guys are familiar with what Silicon Valley is? Silicon Valley, yeah, right, okay. Can I get one person to just tell me what Silicon Valley? Come on, you're not so shy. Silicon Valley, it's a place, right? It's a place in California where Facebook started and other big companies, right? So they've dominated this startup space. Startups are these kind of little ideas. You put some money into it, you got some smart people like you guys, you come together, you get organized, and you say, we're gonna build something, and that something can become, ideally a billion-dollar company. So I went through a similar sort of thing with a biotech company that I started, but I want to introduce you to the landscape. I want to introduce you to the background that existed as I went into, sort of Silicon Valley with my own idea in biology and tried to pitch to these people. So these are the 80s and 90s. These were the dominant players in the world, essentially. These were the biggest new trends in technology and in business that swept the world, right? Your parents were kind of digital natives. I think they're maybe 10 years older than me, maybe 20 years older than me, and they, in their lifetime, started to see computers appear on their desks and started to see them as tools that they could start to use. And these are the two major players, along with other companies, that made this a reality. Have any of you played an old school game that looks like this, with these pixel arty things? Anybody? It might just be a trend, it might just be kind of fun, but anyway, that's what it all used to look like. It's very nostalgic for me. So this is a movie called The Pirates of Silicon Valley. And again, this was a space where a lot of money was to be made. They could see the future was coming, and it was in computers, and they wanted to try to dominate it. So here's just a clip from this movie describing the sort of conniving ways of Bill Gates. So this is Bill Gates here.
It was about that time, maybe 5 years after I got out of Harvard.
I get this call from Bill, who says, "You want to join me and Paul?" It was a 2-bit little company they called Microsoft. First, I think, yeah, I'd like to lose more hair. But then I started thinking, you know how you survive? You make people need you. You survive because you make them need what you have.
Okay, so it's showing a little bit of the obsession side of Bill Gates. But this is Paul Allen. He was one of the co-founders of Microsoft, and he was being inducted into Microsoft, right? He was saying should I be joining this little company? But he noticed he's onto something. Bill Gates is onto something. Anyway, so I encourage you guys to check out that movie. Let's skip ahead a decade. Maybe you guys will recognize this guy. Zuck, the lizard himself right there. This was in the early 2000s. So after computers and their core software were developed, the operating systems, then you had platforms that were built on top of that. Things like Facebook, etc., YouTube, Google, Twitter, Apple, BlackBerry. Do any of you know what BlackBerry is? BlackBerry, yeah? And you look at it with a bit of a laugh, right? Have any of you owned a BlackBerry or you've seen one? You haven't seen one? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. There we go, I'm over there, yeah, that's true. Okay, so these are all software now. You notice that these guys aren't building hardware. Hardware came before this. This was the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates of the world making hardware computers and the core base operating systems, and then you get these layers that go on top of it. These are the people who made the kinds of money that would then go to invest in the next generation of startups when I eventually entered Silicon Valley myself. So here's a clip from the movie The Social Network. So some of you may have seen this. If you haven't, this is one of the best movies there is, in my opinion. On top of that, it tells the story of Mark Zuckerberg and how he started Facebook out of Harvard. So I'll just show you a quick clip from this, just to whet your appetite.
Shit, that looks good. That looks really good. It's clean and simple. No Disneyland, no live new girls. Watch. What you write? Relationship status. Interested in. This is what drives life in college. Are you having sex or aren't you? It's why people take certain classes and sit where they sit and do what they do when at some center, you know? That's what the Facebook is gonna be about. People are gonna log on because after all the cake and watermelon, there's a chance they're actually gonna get laid. Meet a girl. Yes.
So that was the moment that they kind of like launched the Facebook, right, on, and they were kind of emphasizing the importance of socialness, right? And so he had this final inspiration, and that inspiration is what led him to have the courage to hit the final sort of submit button. Any of you guys interested in film or cinematography will notice the gorgeous light rolled off and the way that this is designed and the soundtrack and everything. It's a really well done movie as well. Okay, so now we get to the 2010s, and a lot of the successes of the early 2000s has become imprinted in the minds of venture capitalists, and those venture capitalists themselves are a lot of these people that were successful 10 years ago, 15 years ago with companies that were in software. And so they learned these sort of principles of the road, these sort of things that were like, you have to make these things true in order to run a successful startup. So some of these kind of mindsets are things like fail fast. What does it mean to fail fast? So these guys and girls are very ambitious. And what they do is they put a lot of money into an idea, like a lot, very quickly, 6 months, no more than that. Build out the product, build out the traction, try to get people on board onto your website. And if it fails after 6 months, kill the whole thing. Whoa. Almost killed my coffee. Kill the whole thing. Gotta fail fast so you don't waste time. So you can move on to your next idea and try that instead. Do things that don't scale. Find and service your super fans. So for example, if you have a website that, before Kijiji or before Facebook Marketplace, imagine you had come up with that idea before those existed, right? And you were trying to get people to sell things to each other. Well, okay, my website doesn't fully work, so I'm literally just gonna get in my car and drive products from people's homes to people's homes just to get the website to work, right? That's not gonna scale. You're not gonna be able to do 1,000 people per day or 1,000,000 people per day that way, but at least the service will start. And then from there, you can learn what customers want, you can design the website, and then you can scale after that. Iterate until you find product market fit. So keep on moving, keep on changing, keep on pivoting until you realize what the product needs to look like to match your audience. Anyway, these are a whole bunch, and you can look these up on Y-Combinator's website. Paul Graham is the guy who founded Y-Combinator, along with Sam Altman, who is now the CEO of OpenAI, who is responsible for ChatGPT, by the way. They're all kind of interconnected in a funny way. And you can see a lot of these bits of wisdom on that website. So I want to introduce you now to Y-Combinator. Do you guys know what Y-Combinator is? Has anybody heard of Y-Combinator? Yeah, do you?
Incubator, startup incubator.
What is a startup incubator?
You present your idea to them. If your idea is good, they give you money.
They give you money.
Yeah,
I know. So they'll do more than that. So Y-Combinator, when I went through it, they give you 120,000 American dollars. You have to go to California and spend 4 months with them. And it's not just 4 months that you spend there. It's 4 months that you spend there with their network, right? With their expertise, with this wisdom that they then kind of push on you a little bit, right? And now actually they've increased it. So it's $500,000 that they give you. And they introduce you to their investor network. And it's very likely that you'll actually get the investment that way. And you're more likely to grow. So they are the biggest version of that exists. Let's keep going, yeah?
How much equity do they take?
Good question. So equity is ownership in your company. 7% is the standard. Yeah, but it's negotiable depending on what startup stage you're at sometimes, but generally they try to keep it standard at 7%. Okay, I want to show you something. So YC recently, and by the way, I just want to give you a sense of the scale of Y-Combinator. They give, at least 5 years ago, this is what it was, $120,000 to about 120 companies 3 times a year. 3 times a year, you can do the math. So let's say about 100,000 times 100, how much is that? That's 10 million times 3, that's $30 million every year that they're just spitting out into new companies. I may have even done that wrong. I think it was 300 million every year And a bunch of those companies have birthed some of these behemoths. So as of July 2021, I should have updated this. As of July 2021, these are the biggest companies that have come out of Y-Combinator. You might recognize some of them. Airbnb, Dropbox, you've got Coinbase, some of these more crypto type companies, Stripe. And then I want to just point out though, that almost all of these are software. Almost all of these are software. These are the only ones that are biology, and I'm very proud of them. Ginkgo Bioworks is in synthetic biology. They are basically the biggest automator of synthetic biology in the world. You've got Benchling, which actually some TKS students would know about, so I can introduce TKS as well at the end, but it is software that allows you to design biology through DNA. So that's very cool. And then Rigetti, actually this is a quantum computing company. So actually I've highlighted here just science companies. I'm a little ashamed, honestly. I would love for there to be more science companies on this list instead of more software companies. I think that could be wonderful, and I'd love to help make that happen. Can you spot a non-software company? So this is another show that, well, maybe it's not gonna work. Okay. Yeah, it was the intro to the show called Silicon Valley, which actually I might get you guys to wait a few years before you watch it, but it's all about the startup culture in Silicon Valley. And it's very funny, it's very cool, and it's very raw and real to what the culture is like or was like 5-10 years ago. And at the beginning, they've got all these companies, you know, there's Prime Air. If you guys recognize that, you just say it. There's Airbnb, there's Pinterest. It's this very cool intro. You see Facebook there a little bit. You know, you've got Theranos, but everybody know the story of Theranos? Theranos, a very failed kind of startup. You can see their sign is kind of like crooked. Slack, Airbnb. Anyway, there's this culture in Silicon Valley of this background. You know, there's Alphabet, which is Google's parent company now. There's this background in Silicon Valley of all of these companies having sort of set the foundations that all of the rest of the new startups come out from. Oh, there's Tesla. I didn't even notice Tesla was in there. So, just very quickly, what does it mean to be a startup? We had this question actually earlier. A startup is something that will scale. So, there's a difference between this up here and this down here. This one looks polished. This one looks great. You know, the wood looks marbled, the seats are all nice. This doesn't look great. These are just two guys in a garage, a messy garage, and you know they've got like a computer that isn't even really like put together. What's going on here? This is a startup, and this is not. This barbershop cannot scale. You will not be able to go from one barbershop that's really hot, really successful in one place, and scale it to 1,000 barbershops that are making the same amount of money in 100 places in the same way that these guys could. The reason is, those guys are the founders of Google. This is Sergey Brin and Larry Page. So, from the sort of like wisdom of Y-Combinator, a startup company is designed to grow fast. A barbershop isn't, whereas a search engine is, right? These guys, with the software on these computers and the servers, were servicing 100 million people at this stage. 100 million people. And they were being valued at $50 million in this picture. This barbershop might have been worth, I don't know, $500,000, not even, and it doesn't have the projections of being worth more than that in the future, whereas these guys do have that potential. And the reason is that software can scale. I can build code that all of you guys can use within hours even. Okay, so make something people want and reach and serve a lot of people. These are just kind of general bits of wisdom. A barbershop can't serve millions, but a software team can. Science has a similar power, and I know people typically don't really like pharmaceutical companies, but that's a similar idea, right? You come up with an organic compound, right, that solves some medical problem. You got the compound, and now you hit copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. You can create each one of those at pennies on the dollar and sell them for more than that. Because it's human health, I think people have this sort of like, I'm not sure about making margins, making profit on that, but it's a similar idea. With software, it doesn't cost that much to copy, paste, it's just servers. With pharma, with science, it can be similar. You have a similar superpower. And I'm just going to compare this for you. I think science is going to become more and more exciting, and we've kind of squeezed the lemon of software. You know, the third time that somebody proposes a lawnmower sharing app, you know, Uber-esque type thing for barbershops, you know, it's like, okay, I think we've basically covered all the possible startup angles that you could have, you know, using apps on a phone, right? There's a lot of smart people that have tried a lot of those things. I think we're going to need to do more science now in order to unlock brand new capabilities for brand new kinds of startups. So the one thing though is that it costs money up front to do a science startup, whereas in software, startup costs are low, right? You don't need that much to start a software company. You literally just need smart people and computers, and you can start a software company. And there will be new, exciting software companies that come out. But for now, I think, and this is where I'm throwing my own weight and my own investments is in science. And that's what I'm going to be doing next myself. Okay, let's just blow through this. So 23andMe, Ginkgo Bioworks, this is the biggest synthetic biology company. They came out of Boston. Anybody recognize this lady?
She's still on the hunt, right? Or she's still
Not on the run. She's never on the run. So yeah, she finally got her conviction. So anyway, what happened was she was like a very famous Stanford dropout. At 19, she decided to create her own blood testing company called Theranos. And she was highly inspired by Steve Jobs, just the like black turtleneck sweater. So she wanted to be kind of like the prodigal Steve Jobs, and so she would even pose with her little like nanotainer like this, her little product similar to what Steve Jobs would do. It was very fun. Anyway, but it's a story of things that you can learn from, but also obviously pitfalls to avoid. And then 23andMe, this is benchling. It allows you to do plasma design. These are the kind of companies that I want to see more of, obviously legit versions of them. This is my very first sort of like plan that I created, literally just like, all right, what if we preserve people's young cells? Here's the market. How would we do it? How do we collect samples? What's the general sort of like business model that would work here? And let's go and pitch to velocity. I literally went to one friend. I was like, hey, you want to join my company? Hey, do you want to join my company? Hey, you look cool. Do you want to join my company? I brought them together. We pitched the thing and we won. And so that kind of started the snowball. All of you guys have that potential as well. I even think you have that potential now, but probably until you get to university, something like Waterloo. And then this was us kind of like at the very first bootstrappy. This is literally my high school microscope. When I was your age, I bought myself a microscope and then I literally took it with me to Waterloo. You can see our sort of like whiteboard space, and we're doing cell counting and stuff. So these are the very, very early stages. This is us pitching to Trudeau, the man himself. And then we got into Y-Combinator. Don't have to get through that story. Justin Kahn is the founder of Twitch, and he's the one who got us in. It was a whole founder trade-off thing. We went to Toronto, grew the company in this environment. We raised a $3.3 million seed round. We rebranded to this. I think it looks pretty cool. Here's an opinion from one of the biggest venture capital investors, Andreessen Horowitz. Their whole thing is that software is eating the world. And now they're saying software is going to eat even biology, right? So you need to have this sort of like, any of you guys interested in coding and have an interest in what you want to apply that to, biology has so much potential. Talk to me after if you want some ideas on that to get inspired. You'll see the requests for startups. Number 1 is artificial intelligence, no surprise, but number 2 is bio. Number 2 is biology. The founder of Twitch. How many of you guys have heard of Twitch or like used Twitch or know about Twitch? Yeah, so the guy who founded Twitch is this. His name is Justin Connor. He's one of the co-founders of Twitch. So for a while, in order to get into Y-Combinator, he allowed startup founders to take over his Snapchat, and then do a Snapchat story with their pitch. Like, just put your idea on his Snapchat, and then he would respond to it. And so this is his response to ours. I think it's the whole thing.
Send it back to us, and we preserve your cells.
In the future, we'll ship those young cells to the institutions that have developed those advanced medical therapies as they become available. To make the service as affordable as possible, with the kit just costing between $30 and $50, including shipping, protocols for cryopreservation.
We're cryotech, and we're leading the way to a more
Literally laughing in the pitch. We thought this was all a joke, right? Which was funny.
promising medical future for everyone.
Yeah, this was loud. Anyway, Justin Kahn.
What up, Snap? So I just watched Acorn Biolabs pitch. That was really good. And I just ordered. Bam. Personally, I love the idea of investing in technologies that are going to help me live longer. That's what I really want myself. With regards to business, I like that as a recurring business model, something that people pay for, year over year, probably forever. I think, selling customers on more specifics on exactly what you're going to get and what you're likely to use it for is probably a good idea. Overall, it seems pretty cool. Nice job. All right, looking forward to tomorrow's pitches. Got 4 more tomorrow, and then that's it. And then we'll post them all on YouTube or online somewhere.
Yeah.
I just have one question. What do you think the future of Acorn is?
The future of Acorn. Yeah. Okay, so Acorn is preserving young cells for the future so you can live longer, potentially. So think of things like 3D bioprinting. You guys are kind of familiar with this maybe. So like if you wanted to create a new liver, you could literally cell by cell 3D print it as a new liver. This isn't available technology yet, but there's a lot of people that are working on it. Now imagine you're 80 and your liver fails, and you were smart enough when you were in your teens or in your 20s to freeze some of your own young cells. And now we jump into the future and you're like, oh, my liver's failing, we have a 3D printer. You go back into the freezer, you pull out your young cells, you grow those into a lot more, and then you use those young cells as the source. And now you've got a compatible young version of your own liver for yourself. So that's what Acorn does. Acorn gives people the ability to like store their own young cells. That's the service. And so in the future, we will have to be compatible with more and more of those types of like future capabilities of 3D bioprinting. Or there's ideas in embryology I could get into with you, but those are a bit more advanced. But yeah, that's the future of Acorn. Yeah.
What's like the most challenging step for like a science startup company?
The challenging step for a second, I would say it's starting. It's the first step. It does take a bunch of money and a bunch of knowledge, and when you're trying to guide a bunch of people around you who all are struggling with their own knowledge and their own skills, and you're running out of money and you need a laboratory, pulling that together I think is the hardest part. But a lot of you are going to get lucky. A lot of you are going to go to cool universities, and at those universities you'll have access to professors' labs, and you'll have access to these incubator type labs. And those are the greatest places, and especially at that stage of your life, to experiment, to try business models in science and to kind of piece them together. Yeah.
Do you think that even if one were to not have as good of a knowledge in coding, they could still start a good software company?
So look at Uber. Travis Kalanick is the founder of Uber, and he had some code knowledge, but he wasn't actually a programmer. And the reason that Uber succeeded was not as a result of his programming genius at all. He knew how to hire the people that would do that. And in his mind, he knew that what was more important was actually getting Uber out there and competing with regulatory environments in different cities and getting the app to function. Yeah.
Do you think the kind of next technological boom will still happen in Silicon Valley, or will it happen somewhere else?
That's a really good idea, or a good question. I think it might happen in a combination. Silicon Valley will probably have its finger in it no matter what. The people that work at these venture capital companies, they're like always listening for any possible cool thing to happen. And if you're onto something and you get traction, guarantee you'll get 5 emails from Silicon Valley. And those emails are good, right? Those are emails that say, hey, we want to work with you, we want to invest in you, blah, blah, blah. So it may not come out of Silicon Valley, but I think it'll be at least still connected to Silicon Valley in some way because those people are at the forefront, right? Yeah. And they have money. They all have money.